Good? All right, awesome. So we'll go ahead and get ready to get started. First of all, I would say, you know what? We're still good. Even you guys made it. You guys stayed. So you guys are going to get something extra special. I appreciate that. So my name is James Cuthbert. I'm president of Rock the Bells. I'm excited to have this conversation today. It's funny because the last time I was in this building, I was working here as an SVP of marketing on BET. And then it was right up until the pandemic, and I remember packing up all my stuff and leaving. So this is like the first day I've been back, which is, so it feels weird, but it feels really good. So I'm excited to have this conversation today. Just quickly about Rock the Bells, then I will hand it off to Melissa to do an introduction. So Rock the Bells is a company that exists to elevate classic hip hop culture. It was founded by LL Cool J in 2018, who also works a lot in this building on the NCIS side. He looked out in the marketplace and said, you know what, there's a lot of value to classic hip hop. And he didn't believe that it's being correctly valued in the marketplace. So he wanted to create a company that could really uplift a lot of the artists that started what today is one of the largest impacts on global popular culture, which is hip hop music. So he grabbed a whole bunch of talent. He grabbed people like Eminem and Run and DMC and Roxanne Shante and Salt and Peppa and put them all together and created a company that does content, commerce, and experiences. So that's enough about what I do. I would love to introduce Melissa, who is, I'm gonna get this right, the Global Director of Creative at General Mills.
I am. I have to say a funny story. So James and I used to both, well, I still am at General Mills, but he used to work at General Mills during my tenure. And it's funny that we're reconnecting. And I'm like, man, I think I should be interviewing you. Your boss is LL. My boss is named Doug, by the way. He's awesome. He's fantastic.
Shout out to Doug.
Yeah, shout out to Doug. He got mentioned with LL. But anyway, I feel like James has done very well for himself. So it's fun to reconnect with a Mills alum and get connected. Yeah, so quick little tidbit on me. I've been at General Mills 25 years, which means I started when I was 7. So I'm glad they didn't have stringent child labor laws back then. And I've held a variety of jobs. I actually, my dream in life was to be Katie Couric. And so here I am at General Mills. So I failed miserably at that dream. And I have some funny stories, including working at a television news station in Alexandria, Minnesota. People are like, oh, Alexandria, Virginia. I'm like, nope, Minnesota. Population about 8,000. And I got hired as a weekend anchor, and I'm like, I am a BFD. I am a big deal. Like, this is awesome. And then I go to work, Saturday. And I'm like, where is everyone? Oh my God, I was the only person that worked the weekends. So yes, I did anchor. I also cleaned the bathrooms. I wrote the entire newscast. I shot the entire newscast. I ran the teleprompter with my foot. That is not a lie. You would scroll the teleprompter, because again, I was the only one there. So I'm like, I'm Melissa, and they would be like, oh my God, it stopped starting. So anyway, I lasted about that for 6 months and then found my way to General Mills literally by desperation, because I was like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. And 25 years later, I'm still here. So here I am. That was a long intro, sorry.
No, that's perfect. I remember at General Mills too, because I moved on. I met my wife at a club, which is where you meet your wife. It's a good place. In Minnesota, she was at the University of Minnesota getting her PhD. We are still together. We have 2 amazing kids, but fond memories of Minnesota. Yeah. And Prince and everything. There's lots
and Prince
of friends.
Yeah.
So we'd love to kick this off when we think about kind of like some of the future of marketing with a few questions. So first, we'd love to discuss what do you do to inspire your team? You think about creativity and you think about all the things going, you think about performance marketing. There's people that are focused on kind of like pure brand marketing. There's people that are focused on doing things that are only going to drive kind of like maximize value. But how do you keep people inspired with all this competition and the way the marketplace is today?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I don't know about anyone in this room, but I feel like every single job that I've had, I go into it with like a massive imposter syndrome. Like, oh my God, like I remember they were like, and here's the global creative director. And I'm like, where are they? And I'm like, oh, that's me. And so I feel like actually the way that I inspire or the way that I lead has always been very me. And so I would say it's much more empathy versus expertise. I've never felt like the smartest person in the room, ever. And I don't think I am, actually. But I do think I'm really empathetic to people. And I think when you lead with empathy, you naturally walk into, I'm sorry, I should be talking to you. I'm like looking to everyone.
We're here with friends.
We all have friends. I think you walk into a room with natural curiosity. And I think you also, by default, when you're not the expert, I think you have to ask for help. And I actually think there's no better compliment and no better way for someone to feel valued than to have someone ask for your help. And I think that's easy to forget, because I think when you're put into a leadership role, the pressure is to know the answer. The pressure is to be that smartest person. And I've just ignored that pressure because I truly don't believe that's what I bring. I think I bring an empathy and a relatedness and an influence that I can help kind of move a room to the smartest, but not be the smartest. So I think that works, because I think a lot of people feel on my team that they're empowered to have their own creative mindset and have their own philosophy and bring their own ideas. And I want that, because one person isn't going to make or break anything. You need a bunch of people.
No, I love that. I was recently reading a book called Radical Candor. I don't know if folks have read it. It's really good. So here's the 1 minute version if you don't like reading, or if you don't want to get the audio book. It's basically saying there's two axes. On one axis, there's caring about people. On the other one, there's telling them the truth, or just being honest. And then they have these cool quadrants with some cool names. But what you just said to me, it really struck a chord with me, because this idea of like caring and having empathy.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that is being honest with feedback and clear, and being willing to give it and take it.
Completely. Like, I think being empathetic doesn't mean just always being nice, right? I think being empathetic is having those hard conversations. And I always say, I care enough about you to tell you this. Versus if I didn't care, I would avoid those conversations. I mean, who wants to have those conversations? You know, no one wants to hear, you suck right now. Yeah, no one wants to hear that. But I think if you do it in a way that is with their best intent in mind, that to me is empathetic. That's not avoiding the conversation. It's having it in a way that relates to the position that they're in.
No, I love that, because our founder always says this idea of like, your job is not to be nice, your job is to be good.
Yeah.
And being good means telling the truth.
Yeah.
All right, so next question. So, think about 2022 and some of the things you guys have been working on. Tell me about like what you're really excited about, or something you did that kind of like makes you wake up and just head into the cold, I guess, or.
It is, by the way, it's cold as hell in Minneapolis right now. It's actually cold. I looked at the temp this morning, it was like 19. It snowed this weekend with snow on the ground. And now it's freezing here. I feel like it's following me. Well, there's nothing I did in 2022, but there's a lot that my team did that I would say I was really excited about. And I'm curious, General Mills is a house of brands, so we have like 100 different brands. So I think General Mills a lot of times doesn't mean much to people, but the brands themselves do. So if I think of, did anyone see our Loki charms that we did? It was a partner with Lucky Charms and then Loki, the Marvel character. And what we did was limited edition boxes. We made 5,000 of them. They sold out in like 2 minutes. And it really, I always believe ideas are a team sport, but I really give a woman on my team, her name is Lisa Balzo, she's amazing. I give her credit for seeing that idea through, because like consumers were like creating all these memes of Loki and Lucky and putting all this stuff together. She's like, oh my God, we have to do this. And so I love the idea, one, because it came from consumers, it didn't come from us. And two, it was just us looking. I was talking to someone this morning and they're like, what kind of surveys do you do? And what kind of social monitoring do you do? And I was like, honestly, I don't know. I think we do some of that, but I just have like an amazing team that are like human beings and really interested in like what's happening in life and what's happening in this world. And I just think that's so powerful. It's easy to kind of forget you're a human when you walk into whatever marketing organization you're a part of. It's like you punch your badge and you're like, I'm a marketer now. I must monitor the P&L. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, did you not see that movie, or did you not realize what's happening, or understand, in my case, the favorite drink or whatever, So I love Loki Charms because I think that's a great example. I think another example of just being smart in knowing your audience. So we have Totino's Pizza Snacks. Anyone a fan of Totino's? Yeah, thank you. Totino's is awesome. It actually just grew to be one of our, I think like our $5 or $6 billion brand. So it's a huge, huge brand. And it grew a ton in the pandemic. But one of the audiences that we serve are gamers. And I don't know if, I don't really game, but there's a number of people that do. And, as we think about the Totino's snack and being like, how do you solve a problem for gamers? We launched one of their favorite snacks, their favorite flavors, which is buffalo chicken. So buffalo wings and gamers index very highly together. The issue with that is if you're eating wings while you're gaming, you're getting your joystick all messy or whatever you want to call that thing. I call it a joystick still for my Atari days. But you're getting that all messy. So how do you then launch it in a pizza roll that's mess-free? That is a real legit problem for gamers. And I love that example because I think creativity is really just solving problems in a really innovative way. But you have to solve a relevant problem. And so I just think it's so great that we actually chose an audience. We didn't go full scale and just said, hey, we're going to help gamers with the problem. And I think sometimes when you think about solving problems, it can be intimidating because you think, man, I got to solve big problems like getting all kids to have breakfast or solving, food access, right? There are these big, overwhelming problems that are very, very real. And those are super important. And those are super great to be a part of. I mean, that's incredibly motivating to be a part of something like that. But these everyday smaller problems are just as important. So those gamers, the fact that they can now have their Coors Light, oh, that's just me, sorry. No, but they can have their Coors Light and their buffalo chicken flavored pizza roll is an awesome problem to solve. And so I love thinking about that. So that was another fun one that I thought.
No, I love that because I remember when I was working at General Mills, it's like one of my first jobs out of graduate school, and I was working on Hamburger Helper, and they're like, well, what are you going to do for the Macy's Day Parade? I'm like, why the hell are we in the Macy's Day Parade? because somebody was empowered and they signed a 3-year deal, so I got to take my entire family and sit VIP at the Macy's Day Parade. So see, I love the fact that people can be empowered. So I'll quickly switch gears. It's a very fun position.
By the way, we sold Hamburger Helper. I think it was because you worked on it. I'm just kidding.
I put more cheese in it. I created ultimate cheeseburger mac. 1 pound.
Yeah, exactly. What's an idea? More cheese.
And salt.
10% more.
Another question for you. So you're actually the first woman to hold the role of global creative director at General Mills. So tell me about kudos for that.
Thank you. They apparently were in need of, they were desperate for hire.
No, they got somebody amazing and awesome. So tell me a little bit about like the importance of having a diversity of opinions and thoughts in the room. Why is it important to have a woman's perspective to cultural people with different cultural differences, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think diversity is so important. Diversity of race, of gender, of sexual preference, of experience, of thought, of value. I may be the first female, creative director for Mills. I definitely won't be the last. I work with a group of amazing, amazing women. And I guess the thing that I think about is going back to empathy, because you can tell that's how I show up. There was a study a few years ago out of UCLA that talked about when you see someone in pain, women are more empathetic. And that was a factual study. And I will say, I believe empathy is a skill and behavior that can be taught. There's no question it can be taught. But I also think women come with an advantage because they have it more naturally. And I think that is great. And I think, again, if you think about creativity is really solving problems, you have to be empathetic to that problem. And that's really important in being vulnerable and in actually, I think coming up with an idea and stating it in a room is an incredibly vulnerable experience because you're kind of just waiting like, someone going to tell me that was a piece of shit? And, and there are people that do, right? Yep. And so I really do my best to create an environment where people can be themselves. And that diversity, if you are trying to help solve different problems, the more diverse your team is, the more those people will have experienced different problems. And that's just so important in coming up with all of those solutions. But like the team that I work with, we're like 85% women. And they're kicking ass. They're great. So I feel really fortunate.
Okay, that's awesome. So another question is, so 2023 and beyond, when you think about Mills and it has this story tradition and you think about all the challenges that they've been facing, right now they need creativity more than anything else. Like I remember during the pandemic, I personally transitioned from going to the grocery store, and I actually like going to the grocery store, but I
Yeah.
just don't have time. So now everything is delivered, like, my meats, and I just kind of have my favorite list, and I don't even really go in. So how are you, tell me the importance of brands and creativity as that relates to the future of marketing for Mills.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will change the game, right? Because I think even when you think about performance marketing, which I feel like is kind of the buzz right now and everyone's talking about it, but performance is really the lower funnel, right? I mean, you have to still solve a problem that is very relevant for that person that you're serving.
Yep.
And then make sure that you continue to be relevant as you understand that consumer better. But there's a huge value prop in there, right? What is the value that we're giving the consumer we serve in order to extract the value we want back from them, which is usually their data. So I think creativity will continue to be huge. And I think I'm always amazed when people come up and they're like, I think in the next 3 years we will be there. I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. We had a pandemic. I had no idea that was going to happen. I think, it sounds like inflation is going to get worse before it gets better. I know I go to the grocery store and I'm just astounded at the prices, even just of basic things. So I think brands have to continue to be useful. They have to continue to solve problems. I'm much more interested in the actions brands take than the advertising behind it. I think the advertising is fine, but I think I always believe do something worth talking about. So what are you doing as a brand to make people's lives better? And if it's interesting enough, then advertise it, then do whatever. But sometimes I think it's easy to start with the advertising when in essence it really needs to be the action.
Yeah. So I love that, because I say this all the time, so Adam will probably be like, oh, he says it again. But I always say this idea of great brands have a foot in the cloud and a foot in the concrete.
I love that.
The cloud.
James Cuthbert. ...
But the cloud is the communication. The street is what are you actually doing to impact my journey?
Yeah.
How are you helping me in my life, in my way? So you said that idea of action. So talk about maybe what is an example at General Mills or in your career where you think a brand took that extra step to actually take some kind of action and how that impacted the brand? I went off script a little bit.
No, I love that. What? That wasn't a question we practiced. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think, well, I love simple examples because again, I think it's easy to get caught up in I've got to save the world and, end poverty tomorrow. I'm just thinking with Halloween. So Go-Gurt, are there any parents in here that have Go-Gurt? Okay. So at Halloween, I'm sorry, you don't have to be a parent. It's an all-inclusive. It's an all-inclusive yogurt. I shouldn't have said that. But Go-Gurt for Halloween. Again, someone on my team was so the business brief that came back was how do we make a very seasonless brand and product more seasonal? And how do we compete with, the seasonal offerings that are out there like yummy candy and you're a fun kid's yogurt. But what she did was she partnered with our ITQ group and said, okay, what technology do we have? How can we actually make this product or this design fun? And so they came up with Go-Gurt's alter ego called Glow-Gurt. But anyway, it's they're glow-in-the-dark tubes. And they're super cool. So as a kid or an adult, you think those are super cool. And we had double-digit sales during Halloween, so we're repeating that this year. That to me is an action that you take. And again, it doesn't need to be this, oh my God, we just donated $10 million to X. It's an action that makes all of a sudden my lunchbox snack is really cool and fun. So I love ideas like that. I think the simpler, the better. I think sometimes we over kind of prescribe, make ideas bigger and more complex than they need to be. But that's an idea of I think an action that hopefully,
Yeah, based on the insight, because I know if there's anything in the world that my son brings home that glows in the dark, he immediately pulls me in the bathroom and closes all the doors. Look at me, this is amazing.
And then you're kidnapped for a good half year.
Yeah.
How is your, let's switch tables.
All right,
How is your career, none of this is practice, this is great now, this is fun for me. How has your career been since leaving CPG? And what do you think you've learned from CPG and what are you glad you no longer have to do?
Yeah, sure. So, the thing about working in consumer packaged goods is you really learn how to be a business owner. If you ever want to be an entrepreneur, Or you're saying like, no, one day I want to open that restaurant, or I want to open that business of mine, or I'm going to open, I've always dreamt of like, maybe I'll go to Trinidad and me and my wife will open up a bed and breakfast and people will just be happy all the time and we'll make drinks once my kids go to college. But what I think you learn how to really run a business. And I think a lot of those CPG companies have incredibly strong cross-functional partners. So you're working in a place with these really smart cross-functional teams. You're learning to run the entire P&L. You're learning about kind of like insights and best-in-class marketing practices. So for me, it was this great foundation. So that's what I liked about it. What I didn't like is like, I like to eat, but like I don't like to necessarily like tell people about what they should eat. So it was fun, and I enjoyed the work, but I was looking for something that was tied to something I'm passionate about, which is this culture. So for me, like leaving CPG, my transition job was probably at Coca-Cola, working on the Sprite brand, and I got to do some cool stuff where you put rap lyrics on cans, work with like Drake and like, and Nas and a whole bunch of cool people. And that worked really well. Then I went to Red Bull, which is like marketing stuff, but also kind of like experiential marketing, and got to go on a plane that almost went sideways and freaked out and was like, never want to do that again. I did some really cool stuff there. But then, I left there and, after Red Bull, and I came here to this building to work at BET as SVP of marketing. And then to me, I fall in love with learning. So now I got to learn how to market content. Like that's a whole different game. And like, I'm learning about kind of the ad units, and I'm working with the ad sales team, and we're kind of going through that thing. And then most recently, I was like, what do I really love? And I think what everyone loves falls by answering these three questions. What do I love? What are my God-given gifts? And what have I spent at least 10,000 hours in working in? And when I did I did this long exercise. It took me like 4 months.
Oh my God.
And I finally finished it. I go to my wife and I'm like, listen, I've gone through this exercise. She's like, I can tell you this. And she just told me literally what I came up with in 5 seconds. So what did you learn? I was like, must not have been listening intently when she was telling me about myself one of those days. So I ended up saying, I was like, I love culture. I love marketing strategy. And I love communities. And then this opportunity came to work with LL Cool J, took a phone call, wasn't ready to leave. I was happy here. But it's been 2 years and haven't turned back since.
That's great. Well, it's funny because James is like, the last time I was here was when I worked here. And I'm like, oh, did you go see your floor? And he goes, I couldn't remember the floor. So I was like, oh, that really was a long time. Yeah.
No, it was fun. I lived in Times Square during the pandemic. For anyone who was working here, it was like, freak you out. I was like, people started coughing.
Yeah, that was like ground zero in the US.
Yeah, it was a whole thing that I had to walk home. But anyways, moving on to more questions for you now. We'll switch gears back. When you think about somebody who is a creative or thinking about a career as a creative, like what are some of the things that how should they be preparing yourself to be a great team member or great creative in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. I think kind of like what you were saying, I think learning, I do think there's something I think to be a creative, you again have to be comfortable with vulnerability. I think passion over perfection is really, really important because I think perfect you never actually want to strive for. That shouldn't be the goal. The goal I think should be relevance. I think it should be love. I think it should be creating an action that you want from your consumer. I think curiosity is huge. And I think curiosity and learning go so well together. That's why, I've just been in a number of different positions at Mills, but I always love it because I learn new things. I get to work with new people. That's why I wanted to be Katie Couric, because I was so curious about people, and I thought, oh my God, I can just talk to people for a living. This is incredible. Again, Katie was never in Alexandria, Minnesota. I think those skills and listening, I think listening is also very important. And those are creative skills. I think those are also just like really good leadership skills that I'm always trying to work on and improve. And everyone, I think if you remembered anything, I do feel like asking someone for help is one of the biggest compliments that you can give someone. And I also think it's one of the most vulnerable things you can do. Because I know in times of my life, personally and at work, asking for help is incredibly hard. Whereas I love being the helper. Like put me in a helper job, I can do that all day. But asking for help is very different. But I think being able to do that, especially as a leader, especially in a creative space where there's not things that are right and wrong and black and white, being able to do that, I think, is a gift and actually will get you far. It's very counterintuitive because it's not It's not the expert role, but I have found it to be very helpful for me. And as I've seen other people do it, I think people are very successful who do.
I love that, because when I think about me personally, this idea of active listening, right? I think I'm a great listener. Then I get reminded, this is part of having a family. My kids are like, no, you're not, Dad. Listen sometimes. It's like you're working sometimes. But a good friend of mine and one of my mentors I would talk to him, and there's two things that he does consistently, which I love. The first thing is he takes his phone and puts it down. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes we forget that it's even in your hand. And if you have a phone in your hand, it's very hard for somebody to it's very hard to be attentive. And subconsciously you'll look at them and you'll be like, okay, they're not really paying attention. The second thing is they physically turn all their attention. So it was the phone down, and then it was a lean forward and, hey, how can I, what's up? Mm-hmm. And I remember asking him, I was like, when did you learn to do that? He was like, well, I have to do that because he had some learning disabilities and some other things. He was like, I have to do that in order for me to be able to pay attention. But I was like, I always feel like you're so invested in this conversation. So I think just the idea of learning those active listening skills is incredibly important as well. All right, so I don't even have any more questions, but I can think of a new one.
I know. Does anyone else have any questions?
Even better, questions from the crowd.
For James?
Or Melissa.
Do you have a microphone? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I was ready to throw it. Anyone?
They totally nailed it. No questions. Okay.
Hey, so props for Minneapolis. Love
Hey,
that.
thank you.
Been to Alexandria from Minneapolis.
You have?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Hopkins.
Oh, yes. Okay, Plymouth. My kids go to Wayzata.
Oh, look,
We don't like
We
Hopkins.
live in Excelsior now.
Oh, okay. Paige Becker's, though.
Yeah.
Paige Becker's from Hopkins. Okay, sorry.
So obviously, Mills has a history of working with some really high-profile creative agencies and also doing a lot in-house. Can you talk about your team and how the benefits or upsides and downsides of working with creative partners versus having things that you can develop, grow, and advertise on your own?
Yeah, I know. That's kind of the million-dollar question that I feel like we examine every year, right? Like, are we two-tipped one way or are we two-tipped the other way? We do work with a number of creative partners. We no longer have an AOR model. We have a project-based model. There's good and bad of that, as you can imagine. And then we do have kind of an in-house production, and then production orchestrators that are assigned to our various businesses. So and then we have an internal, like the internal creative team that I lead. We do, manage our agency roster, but we're also responsible for all our partnerships and licensing across all our U.S. brands. Everything from LeBron James to licensing Reese's from Hershey's for our Reese's Puffs cereal. So really across the gamut, I think last year we did about 150 partnerships. Partnerships and licensing for us are a huge, huge growth vector because it allows you to borrow the credibility and audience and ecosystem of a partner. And we think having that group internally is a massive competitive advantage. And I always say you want both us and them, our partners, to walk away from a negotiation and feel like they've won. And I would say 99% of the time that holds true. And you always get the best out of us and then the best out of the partner. So that's kind of how we're organized, if that helps. But I never know what is, the perfect model, and I feel like it changes. Yeah. Oh. Hey.
Adam from
Minnesota? No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Go ahead.
Toronto. Probably
Oh, close
80
enough.
in the room.
Close enough. Further
Also
north.
dealing with cold.
Yeah.
We spoke about outsourcing creative, and then you were talking about leveraging partners, audiences, and their ideas. How do creators and influencers fit into that equation? Being the creative director, are you leveraging them for ideas, for content? Like, where do they fit into your ecosystem?
Yes, and working with them too. I mean, they're also part of the ecosystem. I think they're more dependent based on the idea and the problem that we're trying to solve than like a consistent roster that holds true, because we really try to be true to the integrity of the idea. Now, again, the pluses and minuses of that, just like having, project, agencies based on projects, is hard because sometimes that can come across as transactional versus you don't get to know the foundation of the brand as well. You don't get to know the people as well. But if we try to stay true to the idea, it usually works. Oh, I think we're wrapping. Yeah, we can talk more. I like your sweater too.